I just like worry that it's like limit testing with like you're using people to limit test, and that's like a scary idea to me.
I think I would agree with you ordinarily, especially if he was grabbing like a random person. I can only trust Dr. K because I don't know him that well, but like I would say that in Reckful's case, it's a little exceptional because like Reckful, even if he was using Dr. K as a therapist, it's not like that was a replacement because he was never going to.
This video contains multiple references to suicide. If you personally struggle with suicidal thoughts, then I strongly recommend turning this video off and calling the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or texting the Crisis text line. I put links and numbers to both organizations in the description below. All revenue from this video will be going to the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, a peer-based, wellness-oriented support service with local chapters across America. Please don't harass anybody that appears in this video. This is meant to be a serious discussion in which all sides can work together. This is not a video that I ever wanted to make. Over the last 2 years, I've watched as Dr. K has helped many different people on his Twitch streams. The positive contribution he's making to mental health and society is immeasurable. He's giving a gift to the world. But sometimes even the best of intentions can have negative consequences. And nothing has made me realize that more than the passing away of Reckful.
Hopefully I don't get sued. You know, what happens if someone comes on stream and then kills themselves or something like that? I mean, I think at the end
I'll try not to kill myself anytime soon for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm serious. I think that's
no problem. I haven't thought about killing myself since psilocybin, I think.
Yeah. I believe that. If you do happen to have those thoughts again, feel free to reach out. You have my Discord.
Before we start talking about the dangers of Twitch therapy, I want to take a moment to acknowledge what makes Dr. K so important. So, I think we can all agree that we got a lot of work to do in the area of mental health. Right now, across the world, we're seeing high rates of depression and anxiety, and it's not exactly getting better. Now, one of the factors contributing to this is that our institutions can sometimes be quite deplorable. Fans of Reckful might remember this story about how he got locked in one against his will.
And I went to a mental hospital, right? And they charged me $900 a day, I think, while I was in there. And they wouldn't let me leave, so I can't get out of it. I'm just stuck. And every day for like 10 minutes, a doctor would do a checkup on me and see if I'm suitable to leave. And he would talk to me, and he would just be like, "How do you feel?" And I'd be like, I feel a lot better. I'm not even thinking about killing myself. I just really want to get back to my life. I'm really excited to... Sometimes I would try to bullshit like that a little bit. Then I was like, okay, I'm just going to be completely honest. I feel pretty shitty, but I'm not going to kill myself. Please let me leave, please. Like, I'm fucking do anything to get the fuck out of here. I'll come back every fucking day. You could do a checkup on me, but I just need to get the fuck out of here, please. And they wouldn't let me leave, dude. And it was so scary, and I was stuck. And other people I was talking to in there were like, yeah, I've been here for a year. I was like, oh, yes.
There are a few issues with modern psychiatry. It overemphasizes medication over psychotherapy, it's full of therapists who don't or can't really give it their all, and it's governed by intelligent but out-of-touch leaders. But then, that's where Dr. K comes in. Dr. K is a psychiatrist that graduated from Harvard Medical School, and he also has certifications in meditation, yoga, and Ayurveda. So he's qualified as a doctor and a practitioner of Eastern spirituality. But what really makes Dr. K so different is that he actually relates to a younger demographic. Not only because of his age, but also because he once suffered from a very modern problem: video game addiction. And so he knows how to treat and talk to gamers. With these qualifications, Dr. K started the company Healthy Gamer GG. His goal was to help people on the internet take control of their mental health. By forming an online community, doing live streams, and making content, Dr. K is able to help a large number of people improve their lives. His content usually involves talking about different challenging experiences and how you can overcome them. So it's kind of like life advice, but for mental health. Now, this alone already positions him to help many of the people that were once failed by the system. But Dr. K takes it a step further because he has conversations with famous internet personalities where he helps them with deeply rooted emotional issues.
That's a brilliant... this is what I'm telling you. Like, so I'm going to go back to this idea, right? So, like, there was a man when you were very young, and and there was something that you knew you were, and I'm not talking about like you knew you were, wanted to be an engineer. Like, and then like there was like something that someone told you like, hey, you should be something different. And then you went towards that thing. And then like a little voice inside you said like, hey, that's not who I am. And then this other voice said, no, but that's not who you should, like, you shouldn't be what you are. You should be what these people tell you to be. And then you went further and further and further and further and further away from that voice. And I think what you feel right now is pity. You feel pity towards yourself. You're mourning because like there was like a little girl in there who like had feelings that were completely fair and legitimate. And Pokey told her to shut the fuck up and sit in the closet because we have shit to do.
Now, if you've never seen these before, the first thing you're gonna notice is that these conversations feel like therapy. And I say feel because Healthy Gamer GG and Dr. K state that they are not therapy. But because they feel so much like therapy, they actually have the capacity to be that much more helpful. For one, it helps people get more comfortable with the idea of seeing a therapist, which is a huge deal, and it could even be useful for other therapists to learn from what he does. But most importantly is that it seems to actually help the people that he talks to. So I think we can all agree that Dr. K has had a positive impact on our environment. He has this tremendous potential to heal and the ability to push the mental health meta further. But sometimes his actions can have unintended consequences, and they can even be irresponsible. And I believe that we saw that in his conversations with Reckful. There's a lot to say about Reckful, but to keep it short, he was a very famous and very loved Twitch streamer, and he was also the first big personality to ever appear on Dr. K's stream. In 2019, Dr. K was still in the early phases of growing his brand, but that December, everything changed when he spoke to Reckful. They streamed a total of 6 sessions together, most of which dove very deep into Reckful's childhood trauma. Now at the time, everyone felt that these on-stream pseudo-therapy sessions were incredible. They allowed Reckful to open up about his childhood and seemingly heal right before our very eyes. And this was a sentiment that was also shared by Reckful's family and loved ones.
Wait.
Yeah, what I saw was it seemed like it could be good. I mean, he got him to sort of have these moments of, I guess, realizations of some deep aspects of what he's feeling. So, and Byron really enjoyed, looked like he really enjoyed and really admired him. And
if this does help somebody else, not feel so alone with their problems, and I could see the plus side to that. For me personally, I think just knowing Byron too, is hard for me to like see him in pain again, emotionally.
Yeah. When he was the sessions where he was crying, I still haven't watched them.
Very, very hard for me.
Really painful to see that. But in the beginning, I thought, oh, this is great. He's finally and even he would tweet about, oh my God, I feel so good. This is amazing. He seemed like he was really enjoying it, getting everything out. Yeah, in the beginning, I did think it was very helpful. A part of me was like, oh, this probably should be done in private, or I kind of worried about it a little, but Byron if you watch Byron's stream,
Oh man, I don't want to make a judgment on this video before it goes all the way to making its point. But if the whole point of this video is going to be that Reckful killed himself because of Dr. K, or because it was irresponsible handling on Dr. K's part, that is like such an unbelievable stretch. I guess I'll try to build that argument in this video, but I'm sorry, but there are people that are in therapy that commit suicide. It happens. Also, no offense to any of these other people. Oh man, this is hard to say. I don't like listening to people that don't have firsthand or a lot of secondhand experience with mental illness talk about it, because you just don't know. And it's so immediately obvious when people say shit where it's like, you just have no fucking idea. I see this a lot on Twitter when people are like, man, capitalism is fucking me, and that's where my depression comes from. If I just had more money, that would solve so many of my depressive problems. It's like, no, dude, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Shut the fuck up. I understand you want a new pair of shoes or you want a better apartment, but you no fucking idea what you're talking about. Go the fuck away. Yeah, so like these other people around Reckful's life, I don't know how they associated with him or if they understood him or whatever, but like, yeah, I don't know. It is possible that Dr. K could have referred Reckful to more like official therapy, but the problem is like Reckful already had a really negative triggering experience with a mental health professional, in that he got like fucking committed. So I don't even know if he would have gone, you know, but we'll see. Yeah.
Byron is a person that wears his heart on his sleeve. Yeah. He says whatever he feels, said whatever he feels, and like felt, and wasn't really worried about the consequences. He just, you know, that's who he was.
And I think too, Byron appreciated people reaching out to him and like thanking him, like, thank you for like, you know, being able to be so open about this stuff, you know, and that made Byron feel good, I think, you know.
Now, if you're at all familiar with my channel, then you probably know that I too have...
First guy talking was Reckful's brother, and then Jenna's ex-girlfriend. I know who these people are. I don't want to say too. It's these people knew him more than I did, but one of the problems. I hate talking about this type of shit because it's so gatekeepy. Because if you don't know, I think you just don't know, and you can be friends with somebody for a long time that has mental health issues. But like one of the biggest problems that people suffering from mental health issues have is that people just don't understand the thought process. And like, unfortunately, most humans aren't equipped to do that like caretaker role with somebody with mental health issues. And like invariably, like if you struggle with mental health problems, like you've probably at some point heard somebody close to you in your life say some shit where it's like, all right, like, can we be done with this now? Or like, it's time to move on. Or like, it's time to like, dude, why is this always happening? Right? Like even though these people you can love somebody with a mental health problem and you can like care for them and you can try to take care of them, but like understanding the actual thought process for a normal human, I think is impossible. I don't think you can do it if you haven't actually experienced it. I don't know if you, so like so when people start to try to guess like, oh, like I saw this a lot too, where people are like, Reckful killed himself because of the bullying, like Reckful killed himself because of LSF or whatever. And it's like, man, like that guy's mind had problems that were just so inhuman, that were so far removed from a healthy, normal existence. His brain was fucked. Is it possible that some environmental change could have fixed it? Maybe, but it would have. I think that like that dude should have been yeeted into the fucking jungle and lived with like a tribe for like 6 months to like reset his fucking brain. Where he's like waking up, going out to pick berries, chasing around deer, and then like socializing with a group of people and like walking and doing shit every day, and then sleeping and waking with the sun and the moon. Like he needed a whole like neuro reset because that guy's brain was beyond fucked in ways that most people could never understand. Holy shit. Would you say the thought process of conspiratorial thinking is similar to mental health things like depression? Like, the thing is that like when you have mental health issues, most people, there's like a circle of things that you can feel as a human being. But when you have mental health issues, like that circle opens into things that you didn't even know you could feel. So like to try to explain like what like these like senses of like dread or hopelessness or emptiness are, because like when you think, the thing is that when you think of emptiness normally, you're thinking in this circle. Emptiness to you is like, man, I'm so bored today, I have nothing to do. Or maybe it's like even like sad and you're like, man, like my dog died, I feel really bad. My mom died, oh my God, this is horrible, right? But that like all exists in this like circle of like, these are like human emotions. But then you have these like, if you expand this more, there's like this whole other level of like weird fucked thinking that like is impossible to put into normal human thoughts. A normal person doesn't think like this ever. A normal person's mind can't go to these places. You can't even fathom it. You can't even pretend to fathom it. To get to these places where you like, where you genuinely feel like empty or hollowed as a person, or when you genuinely feel like this hopelessness in your life. Because the problem too is a lot of the vocabulary is shared too. Like, oh, empty. Like, yeah, I felt empty. I felt hopeless. You can, but like, there's a difference between. I can't explain it. I'm sorry. Yeah, fuck. There's no way to put it into words. So I'm trying to explain to you a feeling. And it's just, yeah, it's really, 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 really hard. Jeez. Okay.
Been a fan of Dr. K.
Do you think taking LSD and shrooms made Reckful's condition worse? It might have made it worse just because he saw how normal people think. When Reckful was on acid, I think Reckful had a normal human experience. That's why he enjoyed those drugs so much. Is because he could LSD or psilocybin his way up to what a baseline human experience is. And I think that like visiting that and then going back to being mind fucked. I mean, this is why he was doing mushrooms literally every single day, is to try to like capture that baseline human experience.
Familiar with my channel, then you probably know that I too have been a fan of Dr. K. I even made a full-on documentary about Reckful that praised Dr. K and how he helped him. But the perspective that I had
here, okay, I wish I could explain. I'm sorry, hold on, fuck. Okay, here's like how, like, a normal human being's life is like every time you find a new song, and it's like, oh my god, this is so cool. But you know how you find a new song and then you play it like 50 million times? And then you're like, oh, okay, this is boring now. Like, I'm not as into this song anymore. Time to find a new one. Imagine every single time you found anything new in life, it was like listening to a song you've already listened to 50 million times. Like, that's starting to approach the mindset of somebody that where like there's not even a point to doing anything, or there's not even a point to finding anything new, because you already know, like, just into the core of yourself that you're not going to care about it, or it's not going to make you happy. It's like, that's like approaching the level of like despair that like you get when you're in these like really, really big like major depressive states. And this is absolutely Reckful's day-to-day experience.
About Reckful that praised Dr. K and how he helped him. But the perspective that I had on their relationship completely shifted when Reckful passed away in 2020. It was so unexpected and tragic that it forced me to completely reevaluate the entire last year of his life. That meant reevaluating his relationship with Dr. K as well. Now, at first, I decided that this wasn't worth talking about in a video because Dr. K's presence on Twitch was so clearly a net positive. But as time went on, I began to feel like the ethics behind what Dr. K was doing was a conversation that really needed to happen, especially after learning that Reckful's family felt the same way. And I do want you to know that I've been conflicted throughout the entire process of making this video, because while I do believe that Dr. K made mistakes with Reckful, I also believe that he's basically the best thing that's happened to Twitch since I've been around. Now, before I go on any further, I'd like to make one thing clear. I am not saying that Dr. K caused Reckful's suicide. I think that's an incredibly unfair and unreasonable allegation to make, because there were so many factors that contributed to everything that happened. Reckful struggled with suicide for many years. He struggled with bipolar disorder and depression, he was having financial trouble, his mental health was heavily affected by COVID, and the psilocybin that he was self-medicating with was starting to have diminishing returns. Like everything else in life.
When he says starting, I think Reckful, I don't know if Reckful said this on stream that he microdosed mushrooms. So I don't know how many people know this, but Reckful was taking, so here are the levels of like mushrooms. At 2 grams, you're having like kind of an experience. At 3.5 grams, you're having a full mushroom trip. And then past that, you're doing crazy shit. Microdosing, when somebody says microdosing, they're talking about taking like less than like 1/10 of a gram or less, right? Reckful, at the end of his life, I'm pretty sure for like a year, he was doing 2 grams a day. Every single day, he was doing 2 grams. Which is like, that's how much you take if you want to have like a small like mushroom trip. That's not microdosing. That's like, you're going to be high for like 4 hours. Like you're going to have an experience. Not like a crazy, like a full trip, but you're going to have something. But that was his every single day. And you build a tolerance to, you build a tolerance to this stuff.
Life, this was a very multifaceted issue. But that doesn't mean that Dr. K couldn't have also made mistakes.
Was Reckful having financial troubles? Just confirm. I heard people talk about that, but like, I don't think that would have affected him at all. Reckful could make money if he needed to, because he can stream. And if he was hurt financially, it was just because he was dumping so much money into Everland, which was like his passion project. So 2 grams in one dose. Reckful woke up and he drank he had these little vials of mushrooms, like liquidated shit that he would mix in and drink in the morning. It was 2 grams all at once.
His actions can very well have the potential for negative consequences, and that can easily go underappreciated. So even though those consequences may not have caused Reckful's suicide, I do believe they are still worth criticism in their own right. And I'd like to show you why. I think it's important that we start by investigating the role of trust in Reckful's relationship with Dr. K. Firstly, I believe that Reckful likely trusted Dr. K to have the knowledge and competence of a trained psychiatrist, which I think is a reasonable assumption given how Dr. K advertises himself. Now, to clarify, this doesn't mean that Reckful exclusively viewed Dr. K as a psychiatrist, but rather that he's positioned in a way that his guests will view him as a medical authority. So when Dr. K spoke about mental health related topics, Reckful likely trusted the information to be correct. Where it starts to become concerning is when we begin to see signs that Reckful was viewing their conversations as therapy.
Reckful, do you have a therapist?
I've gone to therapy a few times, but I've never saw it as useful enough to keep going. This time
dramatic.
I do. Well, okay, this is not therapy. But you know what I mean. You are amazing.
Yeah.
You're really, really good at what you do. You helped me a lot.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists. Now I'm worried that what if I incorrectly remembered my past when saying I've gone years of being unhappy.
That's very possible.
And now I'm getting misdiagnosed. So the day after we talked last time,
yeah, I
felt a lot better. I think I might have messaged you about it.
Yeah.
I woke up, I felt more whole. It was good.
Yeah, great.
Then I remember having a moment though. I was sad the day after that. And I remember being like, oh, I'm not fixed. And I was like, obviously I'm not. It's not a permanent, there's no permanent fix to sadness for my whole life. It's going to be up and down, right? But it's such a dumb thought. But I remember having that thought and being like, you know?
Putting up air quotes and saying not therapy makes it seem like Reckful really did perceive his conversations with Dr. K as therapy. And if that's true, then why does Reckful seem to feel this way even though Dr. K explicitly told him that it's not therapy? Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about how these conversations feel like therapy. Even Dr. Phil is considered questionable for his ethics despite the fact that his show clearly feels like a form of entertainment.
Okay, stop. Hey, look at me.
Let's
look
see
at
your
me.
talent.
No, hey. No, you need to look at me.
This is not the case with Dr. K, because his version of pseudotherapy is nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. The fact that people in general believe Dr. K's streams destigmatize therapy already implies that the lines are being blurred. And
to be honest, I always thought therapy was just talking things out with a professional. Where am I mistaken? One of the big... Okay, here's something, here you go. If you want like a big mature thing, if you want to be like a bigger, smarter person, or if you want to try to understand things that most people don't understand, I'm going to give you one word to think about whenever you're trying to understand like how a problem works or why things might be the way they are or like what's like an added dimension that I'm not considering, okay? The word is liability. So liability has to do with who's responsible when things get fucked, okay? And this applies to so many things that people don't think about. So, for instance, right? What if you want to work a little bit because you didn't finish a project at work, so you want to clock out and you want to just finish things up, right? Well, if you get hurt on a job site and you're not clocked in, the liability there is fucked. Your company's going to get in trouble because why the fuck is there an employee off the clock getting injured? Like you might not get workman's comp, like you might get, your life might be fucking destroyed, right? Or like when we talk about like, let's abolish the police. Well, okay, well, if there's a violent interaction, who are you going to call when somebody comes over who's willing to take on the liability of maybe having to kill somebody if shit gets fucked? A citizen doesn't want that liability, right? This is why we have things like, I don't know if Pisco's here, I might trigger him, but this is why things like qualified immunity or exist, or this is why, right? Because there's a lot of liability that goes on with handling these types of altercations. When it comes to therapy, there is a liability when you're dealing with a client to make sure that you're behaving in a way that is ethical, that you're making sure that if they appear to be suicidal or harmful to other people, you're contacting the proper authorities, that you're managing them like in a clinically and medically responsible way. There's a liability that exists there. The problem with being a therapist, but not actually being a therapist, is you are playing the role of caretaker without any of the actual liability. So if shit goes wrong, you don't really have the responsibility you fucked up. I'm not saying that's what happened with Dr. K, but that would be where the criticism is. There's another reason why like doctors aren't supposed to give like medical advice to friends or try to quote unquote treat people without actually treating them, is because like now you're engaged in something where the liability falls completely on the person getting treated, which is not like a good, but the liability aspect, that's something that a lot of people like don't think about,
Dr. K doesn't help his case when he makes the comparison himself, which he does all the time and even did when talking to Reckful.
I'm just telling you, you probably don't want to have it. Yeah.
Why not? It's in my professional interest to actually show what's on my face, not conceal it. So I tend to be different from other psychiatrists in that way, in the sense that like a lot of people try to be a blank slate. I just show what's on my face.
I see. The blank slate does suck. I've talked to a lot of the blank slates.
I think it's stupid.
Dr. K also puts his credentials on display everywhere for the world to see, so it's nearly impossible to separate him from the fact that he is a psychiatrist. But most importantly, even though Dr. K insists that what he's doing isn't therapy, his talks have a clear and positive effect on the well-being of his guests. They are by definition therapeutic, and people speak to him with the expectation of improving their well-being. You saw earlier that Reckful had that very same expectation, and based on how things played out for him, maybe he wasn't so wrong to have it.
How you been, man?
Amazing. Really good. And I think it's pretty much thanks to you. I think everything started working out as soon as we started talking. And it's not a coincidence. Just everything in my life was just working all the time.
I want you to keep in mind that Reckful wasn't alone in viewing these conversations as therapy-like. The Student Doctor Network, a forum for students on the path to becoming doctors,
I would say you need to be like so incredibly careful when you talk about like giving therapy to people online, which is really what Dr. K was doing because of all the potential liability stuff. However, in this case, and I would say you have to be very careful. I would trust or hope that Dr. K can make these decisions. He's honest to God, even on my limited interaction, he seems like a really smart guy, and I don't mean that because he went to Harvard, because fuck school, because apparently that means nothing. He genuinely seems like a really smart person. The thing is that like, I don't think that Dr. K ever replaced therapy for Reckful, because I don't think if Dr. K existed, I don't think Reckful would go to find another therapist. I don't think so. He'd already been through a ton. None of them could prescribe any medication to him because his brother committed suicide on SSRIs. And like, Reckful is just, I think, a very hard person to connect with for most people. So it's not like if Dr. K didn't exist, Reckful would have gone to a real therapist and gotten like all the help that he needed. I don't think that would have been the case, you know? So Civil Destiny, even in most cases of alternative medicine, it's not like it's, if the fake medicine didn't exist, people would get the real stuff? Yeah, maybe, yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry, hold on. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry, no. Alternative medicine is different because I do think there are people that actively seek out alternative medicine in replacement of actual medicine. I do think that happens with alternative medicine stuff sometimes. Like chiropractors are a really good example.
Had begun condemning Dr. K on their message board, particularly because they believed he was performing therapy and that it was dangerous. Dr. K's streams have also sparked a lot of discussion within clinical circles about the potential dangers of blurring the lines of therapy for the purpose of entertainment. I spoke with Dr. Rachel Coward and Dr. Kelly Dunlap about this to get a better idea of how these discussions go.
There have been many conversations just centered on concern for the people that come onto the program. Dr. K is a very smart individual. I've never heard concerns about, you know, his lack of qualifications. It's more, is what's happening here okay for the people who are coming on to the show? Are they being followed up? Are they being supported?
And how do those conversations typically go?
Typically, the conversations are the same. How is this different from therapy? That really is the conversation. I've had it 50 times. At least, and the answers are always, I don't know, I can't tell. I'm glad that mental health is getting a spotlight, and Dr. K does bring mental health into common discussions in groups that might not necessarily have access to discussions about mental health. My concerns are that the interviews that Dr. K tends to have are indistinguishable from therapy. He is affiliated as in the public as a mental health professional. He uses professional titles. It's unclear whether he's friends with his guests or if they are actual therapeutic interventions. And if the line is blurry, the risk of misperception is high, and then the liability is higher. So that's really where my concern is.
And what do you feel specifically is blurring those lines?
Well, if you look broadly at what's the difference between a mental health advocate and a mental health professional, and the work that he seems to be doing on Twitch seems to fall a lot more heavier in the professional side. So he's giving specific advice to specific people. He's giving specific recommendations. He's not giving generalized advice. And these kinds of things are what you would see from a mental
The music is like really trippy. Jesus, sorry.
health professional, not just a mental health advocate, which tends to be much more generalized, not individualized.
If you're sticking to education, you're fine. Like, again, you can talk about depression and its symptoms. You can talk about psychosis and its symptoms and how it manifests. And if someone calls in and is like, oh, I experienced that, it's okay to have empathy and to be a human and go, that sounds like it was really, really hard for you and you went through something really difficult. Like, that's all fair game, because that's all like, that, again, that just falls under education and informing the public. But if it's one person and you're like, okay, let's talk about your childhood.
Right.
You're no longer informing the public. You are doing a deep dive into someone's very personal experience. And whether or not you want to call that therapy, I don't know. If you want, but like, is it perceived as therapy? Do people walk away from that thinking like, okay, yeah, that was a great session? The second I cross that line by either introducing myself as a psychologist or moving into using skills that I have solely because I have trained as a psychologist, I am now using the skills that I have and the legitimacy that I have in order to talk with this person. I'm now bound to those licensure and those ethical requirements because I am acting or presenting myself in a way that says that that is my role.
Now, here's the thing. Dr. K has himself always been aware of the fact that it's not okay to blur these lines. He actually makes the point himself during a suicide awareness stream that he broadcasted on the anniversary of Reckful's passing.
So someone's asking, why do you not want to be a doctor for people that you know? So being a doctor is about being objective, right? So what I want to do is like not let my emotions get in the way of like my clinical training. And when personal relationships arise, emotions and other kinds of boundary issues arise that like make it hard for me to actually function as a competent doctor. So there have been numerous studies done that show that physicians who treat family members are more likely to miss diagnoses than like a rando from the street.
So Dr. K knows that blurred lines are a recipe for disaster, and he attempts to mitigate this by having his guests agree that their conversations are not therapy. But the issue is that with Reckful and possibly many others, that agreement doesn't seem to be convincing enough. Legalities aside, Reckful seem to perceive their conversations as therapy, and Dr. K enabled that with some of his actions. So the lines between therapy and conversation, patient and friend, were very likely being blurred anyways. And so with all of that in mind, I want to get into the details of Dr. K's conversations with Reckful.
Oh my god, this music is so serious.
The first conversation they have together lays the foundation for almost everything they would discuss afterwards. Dr. K helps Reckful identify the source of his depression, a traumatic life event that happened when he was only 5 years old, the day his oldest brother Guy commits suicide.
And I'm gonna say something kind of weird. So, Reckful, I think you love 5-year-old you a lot, and I think you have a lot of hurt because something really bad happened to him. Yeah. Like, you love that kid. And something that was just terrible happened to him.
Destiny, do you think this video has reached out to streamers that have had emotional or traumatic experience with Dr. K's stream to ask them if he had or his people followed up? I doubt you really needed it in case you think it. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that I doubt. No, he did. This guy that did the video probably didn't, because he would have said so, right?
Do you see how, like, that kid is not you? Like, that's like...
Yeah, fuck, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
It's not, right? It's a different...
No.
But you love him so much, and the problem here is that you're trying to protect him and take away what happened to him, but you just can't do it. And you don't know how to help him. And this is the other interesting thing, is you're finding purpose. And why are you finding purpose again? What do you like about what you're doing?
I like that I'm trying to give people something I wanted as a kid.
Who's the focus on? Who are you thinking about?
Just people have an experience what I did.
So I'll tell you, Reckful, listen carefully now. Your depression, you're trying to cure the depression that is growing within kids out there today. You're trying to protect them from what happened to you. How does that feel?
That feels good.
Yeah.
Feels meaningful, yeah.
Good is an understatement. It's the understatement of the fucking year. It is vital. It is crucial. You must do this thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, yeah.
Yeah.
As you can see, this was an extremely emotional conversation. By this point, they had already established that Reckful struggled with suicide throughout his life.
Okay, so when I was 16, I tried to kill myself. I haven't thought about killing myself since psilocybin, I think.
Yeah.
Which is the context I want you to have leading into this next clip.
Yeah, I will say, you can die, but not until you've done what you need to for that 5-year-old. Like, unless you do that first, you're just gonna have to come back and fix that problem later. Death is not... I mean, so in my religion and through some of my experiences through meditation, I really do understand, I believe in things like reincarnation. I also say a lot of things on this stream that are based in science. This is not one of them. So I try to draw a distinction between, what I believe, but I think ultimately,
If I had to guess, I'm too lazy to dig for the full context, but just based on what I know, if I had to guess, the conversation was probably something like, you can't kill yourself until you've figured out this particular thing in life, because my guess is that once you figured out that thing, you're probably not going to want to kill yourself, right? That would be my guess. I would have to listen to the full thing, but
I don't logically believe in reincarnation. It's based on experience, and I've just seen too.
Consciousness is pretty weird.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't put it past consciousness that, how did it just happen in this organism or in that organism?
So I'll.
It could be that there's no organism at all. And
There's a lot of.
Now, Dr. K's phrasing is a bit weird, but on their own, these clips don't seem that bad. But that changes when you combine these clips with Reckful's final streams. When Everland did its first public playtest, Reckful got to experience a taste of finishing his game.
Oh, we're starting to have people log in, dude. What's up, Tom?
oh god, oh no. Oh no, we're about to make the biggest this guy's Danish. He's a 7-foot tall monster with an unbelievable reach. Oh no. Hold on.
My first time seeing this many people in game, dude. It's been like 2 years working on the game. This is cool. I'll look at other people streaming the game.
That's really cool.
He's liking it. He's actually excited. It's fun to see.
This music system is like that.
I'm happy. Someone likes the game. Let's go to the next stream.
Oh, this person has such a cool hairstyle. I would be down for that.
Dude, this is cool.
Now, according to Dr. K, finishing this game was Reckful's life purpose, his dharma, and he can die when he fulfills that life purpose.
You can die, but not until you've done what you need to for that 5-year-old.
The fact that Dr. K entertains Reckful's suicidal ideations at all is, in my opinion, kinda messed up, because it's a really dangerous game to play. But that aside, what do these clips actually mean? Well, they show that Dr. K introduced Reckful to the idea that he could die after finishing his game, and that a couple of months before passing away, Reckful got a taste of finishing that game. Now,
okay. Somebody with training wants to step in and correct me. I fully admit that I don't have like the dearth of experience of talking to a fuck ton of suicidal people in the capacity of a therapist. But if I had to guess, based on my interactions with people that are suicidal and based on my conversations with them, my guess would be that if you are feeling suicidal, the last thing that you want to talk to somebody about over like the long term is like them just saying like, bro, don't kill yourself, bro, don't be suicidal. There's probably more underlying stuff that you want to have conversations about. Now, I will give a giant disclaimer there. I do believe that there is research that backs the idea that if somebody like is in that moment about to kill themselves, like any kind of pause can like give them time to reconsider. So for instance, people make fun of the suicide hotline a lot because they're like, bro, who's gonna fucking call the phone, hear a stranger, and then not fucking kill themselves because somebody like talks to them for 2 seconds. But that, I think that is exactly what happens, is that just the act of talking to somebody for like a minute or two can give somebody like just a few moments to reconsider and step back from that edge. So like, I will be very careful and say that like in an immediate moment, sometimes just chatting with a stranger for a minute or two can be enough to pull somebody back. But in the long term, in terms of therapy or in terms of talking to friends or whatever, just having people say over and over again, like, oh, don't kill yourself. You're so beautiful. Oh no, you're so cool. Like, oh, don't kill yourself. Like when the fixation is on like, you just, please don't kill yourself. Like it's not enough. I think you have to address the problems a little bit more head on when you're playing the role of long-term caretaker and not just like trying to keep somebody, you know, just from not killing themselves. Yeah. But
we don't know if those events are related or if they even had any influence over Reckful at all. But we do know that the possibility exists that they are related and that they did have influence over Reckful.
That's such a weird argument to make, but
Reckful's decisions. And that's where my problem lies. That possibility only exists because Dr. K made the mistake of saying what he said, because he wasn't being careful about his words after blurring the lines of therapy. Now, like I said before, things are never black and white. Reckful had many factors that were driving him towards suicide long before he even met Dr. K. So keep that in mind as you judge for yourself what happened there. But I do feel like I should warn you that if you thought Dr. K was being careless there, then you're only going to find this next part much, much worse. Because the last clip comes from Reckful's final stream.
We probably are living in a simulation. Maybe I should just, should I get us out of here? Maybe the trick is that I need to die to get to the next part. There's another game. Should I risk it and find out? What if it's like Inception?
Did you catch that? Reckful starts talking about reincarnation and ending the simulation that is his life. He even glances at the balcony as he says it.
I believe in things like reincarnation. It's based on experience. And I've just seen too...
Consciousness is pretty weird.
Absolutely.
Now, first of all, in my opinion, what the actual fuck? Like, I'm not a doctor, but somehow I feel like it's common sense that reincarnation is not an appropriate subject to bring up to someone who struggles with suicide. So personally, I don't understand why Dr. K chose to say that to Reckful at all. Now, technically you could argue that Reckful is specifically talking about simulation theory here, but ultimately I think the main takeaway is that Reckful was toying with the idea of ending his life in hopes of waking up to a new one. But with all of that in mind, what does this all mean? It means that Dr. K told Reckful that he believes in reincarnation, and that during his final stream, Reckful talked about reincarnating and committing suicide while glancing at his balcony. So yes, it's reasonable to be concerned that Reckful was using reincarnation as justification for what he did. He was clearly referring to it while making suicidal remarks. And that is, of course, a terrible look for Dr. K. But just like before, it's still not black and white. As far as we know, it was just a manifestation of Reckful already being suicidal, and that reincarnation had little influence over his decisions. In fact, I'd wager to say that this was even likely the case. However, that still doesn't make what Dr. K said okay. Because at the end of the day, there exists a possibility that Reckful used reincarnation to justify his actions because Dr. K told
Theoretically, could we not say like this applies to literally any religion? Couldn't you argue that like literally any religion could encourage you to commit suicide because there's like the promise of like heaven or some afterlife or whatever? Like, again, a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but like I think when people are suicidal, I don't necessarily think they're like, if a person is suicidal, there is something fundamentally broken in you, right? The drive to survive in a human being is pretty big. I don't think it's so much the idea of going to another place that drives people to do it. It's just the matter of fact that like the place that they're in right now is so horrible and they don't ever see it better that like you might as well kill yourself because it doesn't go up from here. I think that's the thought process. Not like, oh God, there's something better on the other side. Like, I don't know. I can like, if this guy would have done the messaging on his video a bit more like reserved, if this guy would have had the messaging a bit better, where he didn't have like the creeping music and all the, I could buy the like, yeah, I could see how maybe this seems like a little bit like Sweatstony, like in terms of what you're talking about. But like, oh my God, this video is really heavy-handed.
told him about it. And that possibility would have never existed if Dr. K didn't act so carelessly in that moment. He's already blurring the lines, establishing trust and drawing attention to his medical authority. There needs to be a consideration for how that can potentially influence people, which also means recognizing when your actions speak louder than your words.
Now, what many people don't know about BPD is that BPD, there's actually some very interesting data. So a lot of people think of BPD as being incurable, but there's some really fascinating data that if you can get in a stable relationship for 2 years and have someone not abandon you, then there's a 50% chance your BPD will like actually go away. I'm confident that there's going to be someone around in your life who will be there for you most of the time when you need them, hopefully, for at least a period of 2 years.
Okay.
How can I be confident in that?
How can you be confident?
Yeah.
Well, you find me stimulating to talk to, and I'm not demanding too much of your time or spamming you with walls of text. And even if I were, you'd feel inclined to answer me because it's you love helping people. it's your passion. So from
Is he
your
gonna bring up the
perspective,
marriage
maybe
tweets?
you can feel confident.
Oh, no.
But then if you put yourself in the shoes of any other human being, I don't know that they'll really spend 2 years with me unless there's.
So Reckful, I'm not counting on them to spend 2 years with you.
What are you counting on?
I'm counting on myself. It's the only
Oh, that
thing
you'll
I can't
spend
be
2 years with me. Yeah, that I believe. That I can believe.
So I can't trust any of them.
True.
So I'm gonna try
It's
to
nice
love
having
you for,
someone to come to every week like this.
I'm gonna try to love you for 2 years at a minimum.
I really appreciate it.
In my opinion, this was incredibly inappropriate for Dr. K to say to Reckful, but unlike the previous examples, Dr. K actually realizes this and attempts to take it back.
So Dr. K and I had an off-stream talk 2 days ago. Yeah,
That's actually what we
So what
talked
happened?
about, right? So I think my impression was we were talking about clarifying what our relationship is,
Yeah.
and whether this is therapy or this isn't therapy, and
Yeah.
what our options are in terms of how to form a relationship. And I think that, the last time we talked on stream, we had a conversation about abandonment. And then I made a very bold claim because I got emotional as well. And I felt like I wanted to be there for you so that you no longer felt this way. And one of the things that happens with me is when I see someone hurting, I want to make them better. And sometimes I will, in that moment, say whatever I think I can to make them feel better, but sometimes that's irresponsible.
Now this is great. I absolutely love that he made sure to have that clarifying talk with Reckful. However, immediately after the conversation, Reckful says this.
Yeah, I want to update the viewers on what happened off stream because they missed one therapy session that isn't therapy.
Now to me that shows a clear discrepancy between what Dr. K told Reckful and how he perceived their conversations anyways. And what that tells me is that when your actions and your words don't align, it becomes a lot harder to take back the things you say and avoid misinterpretation. Plus, there could have been things that Dr. K was doing in those off-stream sessions that led Reckful to believe that they were indeed therapy.
And Byron and I still have the chat logs of Byron telling me, yes, I have been having private sessions with Dr. K. So I know that was going on. And Byron at the time, I remember he tweeted out that he was diagnosed with BPD. Now, who was he seeing at the time? Dr. K. Byron would have told me if he was seeing another therapist.
Right.
Like, we talked weekly. He would have said something. So who did that diagnosis have to come from? And
Right.
if you are giving a diagnosis, you are doing it as a doctor, not as someone that's just giving advice. Because it's illegal to diagnose somebody as a random person, obviously.
Right. He's also splitting there, saying it's not therapy, but it's obviously is therapy. I've been to therapy. That's exactly what therapy is. And he's asking questions. He's leading him to mental practices, digging into his, psychoanalyzing him, looking into his childhood, into his parents, into his how his parents reacted, how with his brother. It's obviously just like therapy, it is therapy.
Now, maybe for a lot of these mistakes that I've shown you so far, they would be more excusable if Dr. K actually was officially acting as his therapist, because then there would be an opportunity for Dr. K to explain these things to Reckful better and navigate the different thoughts and emotions that come up over time. But he wasn't.
Wait, could he have been? Were they not doing private sessions or?
His therapist. He just opened up his trauma like Pandora's box and carried on. Like, what is the importance of having those follow-up sessions?
It's like opening up one of those cans full of snakes and just leaving the snakes in the air, right? If somebody's coming to you to talk about something very serious, whether it is a mental health challenge or whether it's a trauma, those things have to be worked through to completion. It's like you wouldn't start a surgery and just leave somebody half bleeding out. You've got to make sure that it's a closed wound.
Now, we also have to consider how these pseudo-therapy sessions also could have left Reckful with inappropriate expectations, such as the expectations he may have led Reckful to have regarding his type 2 bipolar disorder. Not only did Dr. K question the diagnosis multiple times, but he might have also given Reckful very unrealistic. Now, we also have to consider how these pseudo-therapy sessions also could have left Reckful with inappropriate expectations, such as the expectations he may have led Reckful to have regarding his type 2 bipolar disorder. Not only did Dr. K question the diagnosis multiple times, but he might have also given Reckful very unrealistic expectations for the future of his condition.
So I got a bunch of questions about this because...
Wait, so you're saying you think I was diagnosed incorrectly when they said I have bipolar?
You may have depression on top of that, but what I want you to understand is that like there are different flavors of depression. One of them is a biological, organic, neurochemical kind of thing, and what I'm hearing from, but there are certain features of that you don't really fit that bill. So I'm going to describe.
What's concerning when I saw the Reckful video is when the confrontation happened, when Dr. K says to him, "You're not depressed." And for me, a confrontation, that is a therapeutic technique that you are trained to do as a clinician and as a therapist. And that was the moment for me where it was like, okay, is this a therapeutic intervention or is this just a conversation about advocacy and education? Because that is a tool that therapists use in their toolkit in therapeutic relationships that, again, that have all those other safeguards around them.
Just obviously, yeah, just the authority of that. And then also if he doesn't feel better after all this, then he's really messed up.
When I did talk to him, he seemed like he was
doing better,
but then the pandemic hit and he just took a nosedive.
Right.
And he was just like, everything I've worked for now is like, you know, the feeling of like happiness he had. I think once he realized, oh my God, I'm sad again, he was like, wait, this isn't
devastated.
He was like, wait, I'm sad again. This is fucked. Like I didn't think this was going to happen to me again. And it was just, yeah.
You know, I think there was this like constant expectation, like he just wanted to be cured. Like just 100%, never feel sad again, never feel lonely. And I sometimes think he did feel that way for a while. And he really truly believed he was cured. And then when those feelings started to come back, it was like devastating to him. Like it almost made everything that he felt before.
I don't know this because I don't have the history with Reckful, but this is like I'm pretty sure this is a really common thing with everybody that wrestles with mental health issues. This isn't something that like you experience one time after trying like 50 things. Like it's like once you've gotten like any type of like alleviation of your mental health problems, there's always that looming dread. Like it might even be something as dumb as you didn't get enough sleep last night and then you wake up and your head's a little bit fucked and you're like, oh God, like it's kind of like when I've had like 5 games of League in a row and I've had really good teammates every game and I'm like, oh no. And then like the enemy team gets first blood on game 6 and I'm like, I'm about to like, this is what I get for having 5 good games in a row. I'm about to get fucked. It's over. Because you know what those 2-17 games look like. But it's the same thing with the mental health shit, because you know, as soon as you feel a little twinge, you're like, oh shit. Like, whatever feeling I have now is not gonna last, and we're going back to the fucking dead zone. I think that's a pretty common thing when you're dealing with a lot of these mental health issues.
1,000 times worse. Because
and it sucks too, because it makes it so that even in the times when you're feeling good, you're always kind of undermining that feeling because you know that the shitty part is gonna come back. Like,
his mind. Like, oh fuck! I thought I had it.
Yeah. And I think that contributed to how low he felt those last couple months, for sure.
But if I'm saying you specifically with someone...
Why does she end every sentence with an up inflection? Wait, can you guys hear this?
But if I'm saying you specifically, it sounds like you have this, and I also think it could be that.
Wait.
This is no longer education. It's no longer broad providing of information. I am making a specific observation and possible recommendation based on your individual experience, which is only something I would ever do as a mental health provider with somebody who is under my care.
Jeez.
Now, these were just some of the mistakes that I noticed in Dr. K's conversations with Reckful, but I don't know what kind of similar mistakes Dr. K has made in his other conversations, or if I've even missed some with Reckful. But the important thing is that when there is so much evidence that Dr. K is blurring the lines between therapy and conversation, and that people like Reckful are misperceiving those conversations as therapy, then the mistakes that Dr. K makes can be potentially very serious. So another very important thing to talk about is confidentiality. For those unaware, usually private therapy sessions are confidential, and this is for a good reason. Aside from creating a safe space in which patients feel comfortable sharing their lives, it also provides them with protection. Protection from people knowing the intimate details about them or anyone they talk about. Now, Dr. K obviously can't provide confidentiality with his streams because, well, they're seen by a live audience. In fact, that is largely the appeal of his show. And so what he does instead is make sure that his guests have full control over where the conversation goes. He never forces a topic or question without consent, and he does a pretty fantastic job of respecting boundaries. But when you consider that his guests could very well be viewing their conversations as therapy, it's not hard to see how they might be more likely to open up about intimate details in the hopes of improving their well-being. It is undeniable that a staggering amount of Dr. K's guests have shared their most intimate moments while on his stream. But what if that's having an unintended side effect? What if that actually ends up enabling people who engage in targeted harassment? I mean, if you really wanted to get under someone's skin, what better place to dig for weak spots than a Dr. K pseudotherapy session? Obviously, I'm aware that this kind of thing just happens on the internet, and it's kind of unavoidable. But I do want you to see how it did end up affecting Reckful. In March of 2020, shortly after finishing his talks with Dr. K, Reckful tweeted out a picture of his email inbox, and inside was an email telling him that he should have killed himself like his brother did, and for him to just end it.
That really...
Yeah, 'cause it was all out in the open at that point.
That really affected him. Like, seeing that shit.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it definitely affected Byron severely when people would say things like that.
Well, he's very sensitive to... he would see, there'd be a million positive comments and he'd see one negative one and he would pick that one and go to it.
A big thing, like I said before, is the confidentiality thing. So it's kind of like breaking a barrier, in the mental health world career by doing something like that, which maybe is like him inside being like, I'm going to do that. So like, we can be open about this stuff and breaking the stigma of mental health.
Right.
Like I could see that being a positive thing, but I just think more about, okay, well, you're using real people with real issues to break that stigma. Like maybe we could go a different route.
Here, it's more than therapy. It's therapy on reality TV with thousands of people watching you. And what if later, you say, oh, I'm happy with what I talked about. And what if, you're not actually happy with what you talked about? Byron was a complex person. He was very open. At the same time, if something that one person says can upset you, what about something very revealing about your life? And now, you talked about it, you said it this way or that way. Maybe you're not happy with it. So it's like, it's much worse than... you should have much more liability.
Now look, I'll be the first to say that Reckful was a very open book streamer. Pretty much everything that he talked about with Dr. K was something that he said on his stream at one point or another. So it's not like that information wasn't already out there. But Talking about his insecurities all at once with Dr. K has the subsequent effect of shining a spotlight on them. A spotlight that is now visible by more than just Reckful's fans. And that visibility made it easier to attack Reckful in a way that really hurt. So while I do appreciate Dr. K's consent-based approach on breaching these conversation topics, I think that the consequence of streaming them is still very worth consideration.
One of the things that always, has confused me or made me quizzical about this kind of work is that if you're working with someone one-on-one and you're doing this kind of work in a public space, the information you're giving is for that individual person, and you have absolutely no control how any viewer takes it.
Right.
And that just makes things work
themselves or something.
It makes it so much more complicated because there's no such thing as like mass therapy. I guess you could do groups, but even then, those are like 8 people and they're really targeted and they're really small and you're not making individual recommendations, you're making more broad general recommendations. And so, yeah, you have to be mindful of the health and safety of the person that you're working with. And if there is an audience, mindful of the people who could be watching and what they could possibly be taking away from what you're saying or what that interaction is like.
Right.
Oh, I could start polling people maybe.
So, everything that I've shown you today was designed to point out why Dr. K's pseudotherapy sessions are potentially dangerous. But there is something that you need to keep in mind. Even though I tried my best to approach this topic fairly, there is no getting around the fact that this video of mine focuses much more on the negatives than it does on the positives. If you go and watch Dr. K's conversations with Reckful right now, you'll see that the vast majority of their discussions are positive and insightful and, well, pretty damn amazing. And that's because Dr. K himself is incredible at what he does and is doing a great justice to mental health by drawing in so much attention towards the topic. So the point of this video is not to cancel Dr. K or prevent him from being a public figure, because I really genuinely believe that he is a positive force in the world with good intentions. But at the end of the day, I can't turn a blind eye to the risks associated with his pseudotherapy sessions. There are dangerous lines that he is knowingly crossing, and the potential consequences of that can be very serious. I think that we all need to start getting real about this and have a collective discussion about whether or not it's okay for these therapy streams to continue. I want to open a dialogue about what is and isn't okay when Dr. K does these therapy streams, and I want to make sure that the mistakes I believe he made with Reckful don't ever get repeated again. Because in my opinion, at the end of the day, there are some very valid reasons to criticize Dr. K. Look, I get it. Nobody's perfect, and I don't expect Dr. K to be flawless either, but I do worry about what happens if we pretend that he is. It might seem like he's only making small mistakes, but it's possible that those mistakes will result in people getting the wrong ideas. It's possible that those ideas will lead to someone making the wrong decisions. And it's possible that it's already happened.
How was the video?
That was interesting, I guess.
What are your comments? Yeah, I did.
I don't know. I feel like the guy was trying to make like a responsible video and everything. I think that like the super meme music and shit, it was a little bit far.
The music was atrocious. I don't know why that was in there. But, I mean, I guess the two things that stood out is one, well, I guess it comes down to a question if you think that if you're going to be a psychologist or a doctor, so one of the requirements if you're a psychologist and you take a patient is that you basically can't abandon them. Like, it's very difficult to get rid of a patient once you have one, essentially. Do you know about that or no?
Yeah, you have to be able to list like a specific reason why you're not qualified or why you don't think you can help somebody. Although I've heard that you can like stretch that like if you feel like you just can't connect with a patient, then you can write some shit like, I don't think it would be medically responsible for them to be here. I need to transfer this person to somebody that can handle them. Like, I've heard that's like, especially with people with like BPD, that because they can be so hard to handle or deal with.
Yeah, so like that's I think one of the things that he was harping on is like, is it irresponsible can you hand wave away your rights? Like, for instance, could I mean, again, this is an extreme example, but right? Well, no, not even that. Like, could I open a clinic on the street and just have everyone sign a thing saying, hey, I'm not, this isn't really a doctor's visit, but then do all the exact same things that would happen if you were a doctor, like diagnosing them and, doing everything else. And I guess most of us would say that, no, that's not okay. We don't want, for instance, unqualified people doing it, right? So I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Do you think it's bad to peddle your religion during the course of therapy? If he was preaching about heaven and the Holy Trinity, would it be any different than reincarnation and Dharma? I think that Dr. K generally uses religion in kind of like an allegorical manner, in which case I think it's okay. Humans connect with stories and concepts more than they do with like fact-based, like neurological, like telling somebody like, oh, well, you know, like you can encourage these like, you know, more neurotypical interactions with the neurochemistry of your brain by exhibiting certain types of behaviors at different, like that kind of stuff probably isn't going to connect with much people or connect with people as much as like, you know, Buddha woke up and he saw the sun every day because it made him happier. So I don't know, you know. And then also Dr. K's usually pretty careful about saying like, hey, like I talk about this shit. Is this okay? Or do you not give a fuck? Most therapists should offer you that option where they'll say like, hey, like I'm religious. Like, is it okay if I incorporate this, or would you prefer not to talk about that at all? You know.
Is this the guy?
Hey, yo, yeah, it's me.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. Before I even we even talk or anything, I noticed like the last little while, like you were, I don't know if you were like watching the video at the end or whatever, but well, anyways, because I just kind of wanted to hear like your take on everything.
I mean, I think there are good reasons to be critical of people that do like online therapy, but I feel like your angle of like, I think you reached like pretty far on like two things. And like that combined with the spooky music basically built the narrative that like Dr. K like suicided, you know, Byron into the ground. It's like, that's like the message that I think most people will probably take from the video. Just because of like, I don't know, like the spooky music combined with the clips and everything, that's kind of the impression that I get. Even if that wasn't like necessarily the intention.
Do you think that if I like if the music wasn't there, but the points were the same, that people would, like that would be the general takeaway?
I think the problem is that like the problem is like you're saying on one end you're trying to say that like Dr. K engaged in some behavior that is questionable. When you were you reaching out to the therapist ladies to do that, or was that taken from like other videos or whatever?
I uploaded the interviews with them.
Okay. What they were saying, broadly speaking, about therapy was very on point. There's a big difference between doing like general advice versus doing like specific talking to one person, right? There's a difference between saying like generally, you know, it's good to be in a relationship, blah, 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 as opposed to like, let's talk about your specific relationship, right? Like there's a big difference between those two things for sure. And then working in like an educational activist or kind of like activism thing is way different than like being an individual therapist. And then it's also good to point out that there are potential downsides to therapy. But I feel like the large narrative of the video was like, here are two things of Dr. K that was highly irresponsible. We can draw a line from A, B, C, D, where D is like Byron killing himself. Especially when we're saying things like, as we watched the last video where he brings up the Matrix, and we remember Dr. K talking about reincarnation, and then Reckful looks out the window, you know, thinking about his future jump. Like, it feels like that, like we hardcore like hammered that narrative home. I think that if like that would have been like a 20-second mention in the video, where it's like, you know, arguably, for instance, like this conversation about reincarnation maybe isn't the best thing to have with somebody if you don't have like professional or like actual like client like oversight over somebody so that you can follow up and monitor them. Like I think that would be a good point to bring up, but when you spend so much of the video building on that narrative, it really seems like the whole point is to say like, you know, he killed himself because of Dr. K, I think.
I chose to bring up the reincarnation thing because from my perspective, it was like, it just seemed so irresponsible. I couldn't believe that he said it, kind of thing. Also, I noticed that the chat was like, this is out of context. Just so you know what the context was, in the very intro of my video, I showed the clip where Dr. K is like, oh, and people have warned me against doing this and I can get sued, and what if someone comes on and kills himself? And Rick was like, oh, well, you know, that whole thing. And then he's like, if you ever have those thoughts, you have my Discord. The next thing he says is the whole like, you can die, and then the reincarnation thing. So like that, and like this is coming after, this was like Dr. K was talking about himself getting into how he got into doing what he does. And then it kind of like looped back to like the previous conversation before that, which was that Reckful.
Yeah, but I guess the question is like, what is the purpose what is the purpose of including that much of the narrative? Like I'm playing a game at the same time, so
I don't
100%
know.
remember. Like if I had to guess, it feels like around 50% of the runtime of that video was building the narrative that Dr. K's conversations with Reckful basically drove him to suicide, or might have been a cause of his suicide. Even though I know you put that disclaimer at the beginning, like I'm not saying that Dr. K caused Reckful to commit suicide. It felt like around
not
half
only
the
in the
video
beginning,
was,
but
yeah.
like you know, I even every time, even when I said the reincarnation thing, I followed it up with I don't think this is likely the case and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I guess it's just
in my
weird because there was
defense.
so much time and like aesthetic built into doing that. Like we had like the spooky music, we had like the video callbacks with I think like the gray screen, like
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna say that like I definitely regret the music choice because like it seems to be just working against people taking the video seriously, which is just I definitely fucked up with that. I will say that the music choice I used during the mistake section was the music choice. It's the exact same music I used in my documentary about Reckful, which came out before he passed. During when the section that had Dr. K in it, so it was, and that section was like, I'd also like some context about me. I don't know how many people have seen that video, but I was previously coming at from this angle of like Dr. K was Reckful's savior, you know? I pretty much say that in the video, and I even continued to say that in a different video. Well, not Reckful's savior, but I continued to just sing his praises. So like,
yeah, I guess
me,
I'm not gonna pretend to know like your intention because I just can't. But like you included enough other messages in the video that it feels to me like you weren't trying to do that. But if I like turn my brain off and I just I think you even explicitly, I think you might have almost said that in the video that like Reckful, I think you said that at the end that the overwhelming amount of conversations, or I might have gone back to the beginning and listened again, but the overwhelming amount of
it was
conversations.
at the end,
Oh, okay, yeah, we're positive and helpful.
like it's overwhelming negative. Yeah, like that. I'm painting this very negatively because I'm talking about like I'm making a video about what I see as negatives of his format and like his behavior.
Yeah, I just
But,
think it's
like,
kind of funny because like in a way you kind of you're kind of doing the exact same thing Dr. K does, where he's like, this is not therapy, this is not therapy, and you're like saying like Dr. K didn't cause a suicide, he didn't cause a suicide, but then you go on to like kind of paint the picture. I think that
I could see how.
I think that the majority of the video, I think it was just like an aesthetic choice and then like a narrative focus on that. It was kind of iffy. I think that like broadly speaking, I think there's like a lot of good points. I just think that driving home that narrative really felt like that was more of a fixation on the video than you probably wanted it to be.
I definitely like was trying to do it in like from my perspective, it was like I felt that these things were like big fuck ups, so I felt that they should be talked about. But
Yeah,
I was
would
like,
say
I have to come up with a way to. I definitely fucked up on the tone and the music, but I thought of it as like I can somehow, if I word it right, I can say these things. People coming away from it thinking, okay, obviously Dr. K didn't cause anything, but I could see how like that was just so irresponsible because it's creating this like world where it could happen that didn't need to exist because of this therapy context that it's all happening within.
Yeah, I understand that. I would say like from a personal level, it's really, really hard. I think you have to be really, really careful when it comes to backseating things. And I kind of got annoyed listening to some of his family members, but I don't care. Maybe it's not in my place to say that. It's really, really, really easy once a horrible thing happens to go back and like quarterback like everything for why. Oh, it was because of that. But like that's really easy to say after the fact. Like, oh wow, the person killed themselves, and now you're gonna go back and uncover the red flags. Like, congratulations, you know. It might be the case that like people hearing about any type of afterlife, you know, maybe in the context of a larger conversation, like is like a feel good thing. Like my understanding, and again, this is personal. I might be wrong on this. I don't have like a survey or whatever, but my understanding is that like people don't kill themselves looking forward to like the next life. It's because they're trying to alleviate the absolute like bottomless despair that is their current existence, and it feels like what the rest of their existence will be like. They don't care if there's another life or not. They just need to end it. Like they just have to escape the pain. So like I don't know in terms of like talking about like reincarnation or something, if that's something that's going to push somebody over. A lot of the time suicide is like a spur of the moment thing, especially for somebody that is as manic as
Definitely.
Reckful.
I agree.
He was on a super manic high when you can tell by his tweets and everything. Yeah, so I mean like that's just like I can't like 100% say. There might be other people with more experience in therapy that can say that, but like I would be really careful generally when talking about a suicidal person, like, oh, that's the thing, because again, after the fact, it's really easy to like point to a bunch of things that maybe
and like I know that like, well, I feel like your audience or not just your audience, but people in general probably don't believe me when I say I really don't think Dr. K caused reckless suicide, and that I actually really like Dr. K. People probably, I can see how people would watch that video. Well, I mean, I've seen it happen live. That the people are thinking that I'm just like trying to take him down or whatever.
I would have thought that your intentions were bad if you only included that one disclaimer in the very beginning. But like you actually, I think you said multiple times throughout the video that wasn't the picture you were trying to paint. That's why I said earlier that it wasn't an intentionality thing. I just think your aesthetic and narrative choices kind of ran contrary to your message. I personally, I don't think that was what you were trying to do. I just think that's how it came off. Or if you were trying to do it, it's really weird that you threw in so many disclaimers as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the last point that we were talking about before that tangent?
I think I was focusing on like the trying to go back and say like, oh, like that's the reason why they killed him, or this thing caused that thing.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to, like, I don't want to say like this is the cause. I don't believe the causality of it at all. But I just think it's like, wow, this is something that like I feel like I would never do, and that like it seems so like risky to me, and like I know I'm not alone in thinking that. Like maybe like it doesn't seem that way to you, but I definitely, when I was like, you know, talking, because I had been thinking about this for a long time. When I would tell people that part, that like, oh, and then one of the things I didn't like was that Dr. K like told Rectful that he believes in reincarnation. Like almost everyone I would say that to would be like that was their reaction, which was like what my reaction was, which obviously is a confirmation bias thing. It's just sort of made me feel like, okay, like I'm not alone in thinking this.
That's the thing, confirmation bias, seeking opinions that conform with their own. Because the reason why I say is to be worried about this is like it might be the case that there are some people that were suicidal and then they hear about things related to like reincarnation, and maybe that person, you know, has a thought like, if we're gonna say that somebody kills themselves so that they think that they can be reincarnated as something different, maybe there are people that try to live better lives so that they get reincarnated as something different, right? Like who are we to say? Like that's a hard one to like,
right.
You know? Like, are Buddhist people like more suicidal than, you know, atheists or Christians? Like, yeah, that's why I just try to be really
it's
careful.
not about like whether the concept of reincarnation makes people suicidal. It just, it was more what sat wrong with me. And I guess I should have mentioned this, that like the two doctors I interviewed, I asked them about it, and they also said that they thought that it was like a not good moment. They were like, I didn't approve of that type of thing. But to me, it was just more the fact that he is suicidal. That to like choose to bring it up when, like, I don't know, I see like in retrospect now I'm seeing the argument that like it's just designed to like keep him around longer. It's like, but to me it just like seemed so irresponsible and risky, and like why go there anyway? Like
I think I think it would be so cool to watch a really good therapist talk to somebody who's suicidal. I think that there's like what to talk about. Sometimes you have to go there. Like I know that when we talk to friends or family members or other people that are suicidal, you seem like you want to avoid the topic as much as possible. But I think that it's possible to give this feeling that the person that you're talking to is like just trying to make you not die. Kind of like when we go to a medical hospital, hospitals don't make you healthy. They just make it so you're not dying, and then you go home, and then hopefully you can be healthy there. But when we go to mental health professionals, we actually have a different expectation. We don't want to just not be dying. We want to be more than just not dead when we leave. We want to actually get like mentally healthier. And I think that when the only engagement you have with the topic of suicide is somebody being like, no, don't kill you, we'll miss you, LOL. Like, oh no, like people love you. Like, I don't think that does anything for a suicidal person. Like that like if anything, you're guilt tripping them, and then they feel even shittier about it. But you're not actually like addressing those thoughts. I think that in the context of like therapy, especially we were talking to people with really challenging issues, so things like BPD or things like bipolar or things like suicidal ideation, there are going to be some challenging and I think potentially even confrontational conversations. It's like that's
but it's not. Yeah. But he says it's not therapy, so it's like, why take it? Like, I don't know.
I mean, it is therapy, right? It is.
I mean, it feels like therapy, but Dr. K would never say it is therapy. And
I mean, like, for legal reasons, because he doesn't want the liability.
But like, it shouldn't just be for. I know, like, obviously liability is a big factor, but it shouldn't be. It should also just be for like safety reasons. Like, he should take a step back from being. It shouldn't be getting to the situations where he's opening up like trauma and talking about like suicide and stuff like that.
And I would
like, while I do agree that like the destigmatizing thing is really good, I just like worry that it's like limit testing with like you're using people to limit test, and that's like a scary idea to me.
I think I would agree with you ordinarily, especially if he was grabbing like a random person. I can only trust Dr. K because I don't know him that well, but like I would say that in Reckful's case, it's a little exceptional because like Reckful, even if he was using Dr. K as a therapist, it's not like that was a replacement because he was never going to another therapist.
No, I agree with that for sure. But I do also think that he was viewing like those sessions or those conversations as sessions.
Yeah, I agree. He was. Reckful absolutely was. But I'm just saying that like technically the bad thing about that, the worst thing about alternative medicine or therapy that's not therapy is when people seek that in replacement of actual help. That's a really bad thing because your therapist has obligations to you for reporting purposes or medication.
Right.
Or whatever. Yeah.
But Dr. K doesn't have those obligations even though he's doing therapy, and like that's
which is
like,
a problem.
That's why I said in the
Yeah.
video. Yeah, I think that if he was actually his therapist, that it would have been a lot better because then there's just like all those boundaries and things are in place just in case.
I agree with
and
that.
Also you said like like Reckful's an exception, but like for a random person you would typically agree. But like wasn't Reckful like this is the stuff? Most of the stuff about reincarnation and stuff like that was from the first talk. So, like, for Dr. K, wasn't Reckful more or less a random person anyways? Like,
I would have to go back and see how much he knew about him in the very first conversation. The only reason why, when I say Reckful isn't a random person, all I'm saying is that, like, Reckful is somebody that had already kind of exhausted a lot of his mental health, like, the conventional options. And even if he never talked to Dr. K, he's, like, he wasn't going to see another therapist. Like, he already can't get SSRI prescriptions because his other brother killed himself. He'd already bounced around through a ton of other therapists, and he was a very difficult person to connect with.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I actually do think that like what Dr. K did for Reckful like helped him more than anything. I just think that it was also incredibly risky and irresponsible, and like that doesn't sit well with me because looking back on it. And also just like I noticed you asked like whether or not he had been seeing Dr. K off stream and stuff like that. And I know that like I guess a lot of people are privy to this information, but like this is coming from Blue and I think Mercs, but maybe it's just Blue, that they actually shortly after those on-stream conversations, they completely stopped talking more or less. And that like Reckful had sort of felt, supposedly Reckful had felt that like, that it just wasn't like blowing his mind the way it had before. And so he kind of like grew bored of it. So yeah, like they weren't really having ongoing conversations in the months after or whatever. Just wanted to put that out there.
Do you know if he ever was his professional therapist at one point in time or no?
No. So they had off-stream conversations, but they were the same sort of thing where it was like
not official. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's something that can help in the future for videos like that, where where you're worried about your message being taken incorrectly. I think like very crystal clear calls to action in the end can probably help like elucidate like what exactly your prescription is. So for instance, like if at the end of the video you're like, I think that we should be more careful when it comes to this, or I'm not saying we should do this, but maybe it's a good idea to do this, like having a set of things to do rather than people like watching the video and then being like, fucking Dr. K killed Byron, this is horrible, like we need to do something, because otherwise if you don't have like that direct call to action, I think that's kind of but and then there was also
that was like I said something like I don't know where the lines need to be drawn, but I do think that they need to be drawn somewhere.
Sure.
And that they're like, that's not happening.
Yeah, I was going to say there was also the whole narrative about like he said like you can die once you finish this or whatever, or this is like your life's project, and then it was like, well, Everland like got into alpha testing, so maybe that's why he killed himself. Like, yeah.
Well, but again, like I say it in there that like this is it, that like, it's not so simple. Like he's not killing himself because of this. Like he has like there were so many other bigger reasons before even Dr. K was a part of the picture that Reckful was driven towards suicide. But it's just like it was just to me like another thing like I understood, okay, he's saying like finish this first, like you have a little bit of like something keeping you a little longer, you know what I mean? Like that's what I think he's saying, but I just like the fact that he phrases it like you can die when you do this is like I don't know. I just feel like it's the kind of thing that if it wasn't this like streamed fake therapy session where he wouldn't end up saying it like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like,
I mean, like
so-
maybe, but I mean, like it super depends on like if I had to guess, and it's really hard to guess like his intentionality. Like if I had to guess, right? Like if I'm talking to a friend and they're suicidal and they hate their life and they're done, but they're like really into music or whatever. And I think that like if they could just like actually work and finish on certain projects, I bet they'd feel better. Like I might say something to that person like, listen, if you really want to kill yourself, fine, but you should at least finish this thing or this thing first. Like because the idea is probably that, like if they do finish that and if they get through that, like hopefully their mind state at the end will be more beneficial and they won't want to kill themselves, right? Like that's like a guess,
right?
Yeah, right?
Like,
Yeah.
but like you're not like a psychiatrist in a sort of therapy session. So, you know what I mean? I feel like that context makes it worse.
Well, I mean, like arguably he was as close to a therapist as he could have been, right?
Yeah, but I just mean like, well, I guess. But then like, I don't know. I don't know enough. I can't speak on that because like I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how a therapy session is supposed to go. But like I've had therapy, but like obviously I'm not Rectful, so I don't know how a therapy with someone like Rectful is supposed to go. I would imagine that you don't get into you can die in the first session or whatever, but
I mean, to be fair, Dr. K definitely speed runs his one session with people for sure, because he'll make some pretty big jumps that I'm pretty sure most therapists will probably talk to you for a few sessions before they start to piece together your life. And Dr. K seems to be very eager sometimes to like put together a lot of pieces in like the first like hour conversation for whatever reason, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole element that I didn't get into at all in the video that I think is worth talking about too, but like I don't need to bring up that, like I don't need to be the one to make a video about it, but like just that it being content creation is like a whole other thing in terms of like how that can cloud what's supposed to happen and stuff like that, and like the nature of things.
Potentially, yeah.
But I didn't do too much thinking about that, so I'm not even gonna like. But it was just like one of the things that crossed my mind that I was like, you know what? Let's not put that in the video because that's gonna make people think worse of Dr. K. I don't know. Yeah, like the you can die thing. For me, it's similar to the reincarnation comment where it's just like, oh man, like why did you say it like that? And like, I guess that's just my subjective opinion.
Yeah,
though.
okay, I got somebody asked this question a lot. How did Dr. K diagnose him with BPD? Or what did that mean? What was the point of that part?
Okay, so the diagnosis came off stream. So I actually didn't make the claim in the video that he definitely diagnosed with BPD, but that I just showed Jenna talking about how he had suddenly had a diagnosis, and like the Jenna was saying that he wasn't seeing any therapists, and even you're saying that he wouldn't be seeing any therapists. So like, where does this diagnosis coming from? You can even see when he tweeted it, I even commented like, is this a professional diagnosis?
So it's not. But do you think he got a diagnosis, or do you think Dr. K just said you seem like you act more like a BPD person than a?
I'm not sure, but then there was the part afterwards or before. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but there was the part where Dr. K starts telling Byron about like the symptoms of BPD and how like there's this whole. I showed the clip where he's saying like, oh, there's this controversial treatment that if you can be in a stable relationship for 2 years, your BPD will go away, and that I'm gonna love you for 2 years. I'm gonna be that stable relationship. So like. I mean, it seems to be like he's saying, why would he be loving him for 2 years unless he thinks that Rectful has BPD? And then, like, if Rectful didn't previously have a diagnosis of BPD before 2020, which was he, according to Rectful's Twitter, that seems to be the case. Like, it's hard to feel like it came from anywhere else, but I can't say I know for sure, right?
Yeah, sure, it's fine. Yeah, I was just curious. Like, what that that diagnosis meant. If he was like changing his medication or something for it, right?
Well, I mean, it seemed like Rectful's medication was just taking psilocybin, which I didn't really get into in the video either, but like Dr. K encouraged the mushroom taking a few of times. And this is also seems to be a sentiment that Rectful's friends that I had spoke to, a couple of them had mentioned the same thing, that Dr. K was in support of the mushrooms.
Really?
But that's hearsay. Like, I don't know if that's actually true.
Okay, because I've always heard him speak really because I love drugs, and I've always heard him speak really negatively of like that type of stuff.
So I think what happened is in the first conversation, Dr. K probably like unintentionally made his stance on it confusing, because I know in the first conversation he just started going into like all these like, oh, there's this great research about psilocybin mushrooms and the positive effects it can have for mental health and therapy, and like didn't really get into too much of like don't do mushrooms or anything like that. And then like two of Reckl's friends had said to me when I was asking them questions that like they seemed to think that Dr. K had encouraged it, but like I don't know where they got their ideas from.
Yeah, I would have to watch because when I talked to Dr. K, he seemed like super against it. Like he always talked about how it was a shortcut.
Yeah, I would. This is why I didn't put it in the video, because like
also,
I think that
clear,
what you're saying makes more sense.
Yeah, and then also just because a lot of people have heard this a lot now. The clinical evidence for like mushrooms or ketamine or any of these things treating depression, these are like clinical trials that are running now. However, this is like a one-time thing or like a controlled thing. It's not taking it every single day like Reckful was doing it. Reckful abused the fuck out of mushrooms. No therapist or anybody is like recommending that type of thing right now.
Yeah. Also, like, yeah, because like, but that was talking about like mushrooms in a therapeutic setting and with professionals and stuff, and like, I don't even understand how Reckful was even taking mushrooms daily and not like growing such tolerance that they did nothing.
He probably
like,
was. I don't, because he didn't really get high at the end. He just like he took them for the morning, and he just said they just like improved his mood basically. So to him, it was probably a microdose.
Right. Yeah, because I know it's like a very quick tolerance build with mushrooms. Yeah. I don't know. To me, like, I understand, like, obviously after seeing like the reactions to the video that like the putting in the reincarnation and the you can die thing is clearly controversial.
I think you could have done it. I think that having those was okay. They just needed to be like 2 minutes instead of 25 minutes, I think.
Because those parts weren't that well. Okay, I set up the context for them for like 5 minutes, and then I talk about them for like 5 minutes.
Okay,
so
because
like
it felt like half the video was on like 2 or 3 really horrible things, like Dr. K talking about the reincarnation thing, Dr. K talking about how he can kill himself once he's finished his game, and then Dr. K talking about how he can kill himself once he's helped his fighter. It felt like 20 minutes of that video, but that might just be in my head, maybe not. But it felt like a lot was spent on that. But I mean, like, yeah, we're running around in circles. Like, I understand. Yeah, I would say that like those parts being significantly shorter probably would have gone on to give the message of the video not such a horrendously negative depiction of Dr. K would be my guess. But even though I see you try to do otherwise, yeah.
Do you think that like this is something that the people on Twitch, or like not people on Twitch, but just people in general in like the whole Twitch sphere should be like thinking about more and talking about more?
I'm ultra black pilled on everything related to mental health and everything. I don't think anybody knows what any of these things are. Fucking 80% of people online today think that depression is when capitalism happens, and like, so I don't know. At this point, like, I'm hungry as fuck for anybody to get out and have like good conversations about mental health. And based on the little bit, admittedly, that I've seen of Dr. K, and then I guess my talk with him, like, he seems like he has like a pretty good mind for it. So I'm glad that somebody that understands is talking about it. Now, like, is therapy for streamers like highly potentially problematic? Yeah, of course. There's and I think that you even could have focused more on that, like the idea of like opening yourself up publicly can have like potentially a lot of negative blowback. That the type of like therapy that you might get or engage in a public setting might be a lot different than in a private setting, because maybe you're not comfortable sharing as much, or maybe you're a little bit more careful. Yeah, and I think there are good arguments to be had there, but like I like the current understanding and conversation around mental health, I think, is really bad publicly. So I don't know.
So you see, Doc, is basically like right now we're at a point where we just need Dr. K to do his thing so people can like level up their understanding before we have the conversation kind of thing?
Potentially. Or I see him like there might be some downsides, but overwhelmingly I view it as like a net positive, you know. But maybe be a little bit more careful. Like, I think that what he does, for instance, like the one-off conversations, I think are decent.
That's the only thing I like want to change about what he does. I love everything that isn't the one-on-one conversations. I even like the one-on-one conversations because, like, I think how could you not like them? Well, they're so like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think the one-on-ones are fine when it's like a one-time thing, or maybe like a one-time thing with a follow-up in 6 months. But when you start doing them regularly, the type of relationship you're building with no liability there gets a lot more fuzzy. Right. Yeah. Which I think is.
I think there needs to be like an offboarding process or something where like he hooks you up with like a coach or something, or just someone to like make sure you're okay. Or
yeah, but at that point you're really therapy. Like, you're probably gonna have to start signing like HIPAA forms and shit if you're starting to offboard people, because now you are assuming some level of liability, right?
Right. I see. I didn't think about that. But then like you just have to like not go as far in your one-on-one conversations. That's how I see it, at least. Like maybe don't go so far.
Maybe,
like,
or you can go
the
far, but you
trade-off.
understand like it's just a one-time thing, and it's not going to be somebody that you visit every week or something, right?
Yeah, but like, what if like, you know, as I said in the video, like Pandora's box is opened in that one-off conversation. Like what? And like, let's say you screen the person and you don't think it's gonna happen, but then it just turns out that like the thing they wanted to talk about like was like rooted in some like deep shit.
What do you
that,
mean by
like is now open?
What do you mean by that?
Like you're opening up a childhood trauma or something that they didn't even realize was gonna happen, right? Like he has done a few times, and like now this person, if it's a one-off conversation, this person is like left with open trauma, and like it's not like, you know, Healthy Gamer GG is like separate from them, so they're not going to ensure that this person they can recommend it, but this person might not necessarily be seeing a mental health professional afterwards, but maybe this person needs to because they've been opened, and like now they need to like process it. Especially since
that's
he
a fair
speed runs.
point. No, yeah, I think I agree with that, because there are some times where out of nowhere, like the topics will get very, very, very heavy, and if you begin to explore that for the first time in a very public setting, but then you don't have anybody like past your one talk with him to really walk you through that, that might leave you like in a pretty awkward spot. Yeah, that's probably a fair point. Yeah.
Also, regarding the like whole confidentiality, you know, like how like it being streamed makes you talk about things differently or whatever. One thing that I think is worth bringing up is that I did a little discussion stream right after the video came out, and I had Mudahar, some ordinary gamer. He was a guest on Dr. K's stream, and he was on my stream. We were talking about it, and he said that he's like a very reserved person, but somehow Dr. K got him to open up about stuff he never thought he would talk about, and he went through like a week-long period of like high anxiety because he really regretted saying what he said because it was
that's
very
possible.
personal.
Dr. K is very, very, very good at talking. He's very good. I'm sorry, more specifically at being an interlocutor. Like he can speak to somebody and like get to like he can like, he's very, very, very good at talking to people. He can like get to things like very quickly, which is why I kind of joke that he speedruns a conversation, and maybe he does move a little bit too quickly, maybe, but he is also very adept at those conversations, like to his credit. So it wouldn't surprise me if you could put somebody in front of him that ordinarily wouldn't be open that much, and after an hour conversation, they've talked about a lot of things that they probably never talked about with another living person in their entire life, for sure. Yeah. You also have to keep in mind that to some people, this is a totally untested, total bullshit theory I have, and it might not be real at all. You ever watch like the JCS videos?
No.
It's like police interrogation shit.
Okay, I've seen some of those, yeah.
I have a theory in my mind. I think that one of the reasons why people are so eager to open up to like police interrogators, especially when they get like more like manipulative, is because having a feeling that somebody is asking you questions about your life and is genuinely interested and cares about you, that is a feeling that is so unimaginably addictive to somebody that's never experienced that before, that it wouldn't surprise me that if you put most people that live ordinary lives that have never talked to somebody and engaged with somebody in a conversation like that, if you put them in front of somebody that will ask them those questions and show that interest, they will probably divulge things that they never imagined they would, just because that type of attention can be very foreign to people and can make you incredibly high off of like that interaction. Like I can like talk to somebody and they're caring, they're asking me questions about things like, oh my god, there's so much I want to share, because most people, especially men, don't really have those interactions with other people in conversations. I'm just reinforcing what you said earlier. Like I can believe that somebody would open up and say things that they ordinarily wouldn't expect to.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, yeah, you're right, it's like not a tested theory, but that sounds pretty believable to me. Like I think that holds true. I remember I was like sometime recently I was like just briefly like watching Dr. K talk to you, and I noticed how he like speed runs the conversations by like he really gets to you or anyone he's talking to talk about like what they mean by certain things and get to like really personal meanings of concepts. Like that seems to be how like his way of getting, and like that goes with what you're saying. Like it's, you know, you're getting to say like your inner perspective that people don't usually care about, you know. So naturally, like it's easy to get guided along to feel more comfortable talking about personal stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I wanted to. I was hoping that you would actually end up. I'm happy that you watched it because like I respect your opinions on a lot of things. It's based on your chat's reaction though. I feel like I'm doomed to be like hated and thought of in the worst possible way.
I mean, like I said, like I could intentionally like, or I could ascribe an intentionality to you that you were trying to fuck with them, but I think you had so many disclaimers in the video. It doesn't seem like that was overall your intention. And like it seemed like pretty genuine, but yeah, I just think it was the focusing on like so many of those narratives. I think that just probably left a lot of people thinking like, oh, this guy just hates Dr. K. That'd be like my guess, but yeah.
Right. Does it make sense though? Like, did I help make it sense why I chose to put it in, or do you feel like my reasoning was not really like strong enough?
No, I mean I can understand why, but that's why earlier I criticized it. It was like I think it was like an aesthetic choice, like just the amount of time spent on it, the spooky music and shit, like made it seem like I was watching like a
it's
murder.
An optics problem.
Yeah, it was like a murder investigation video a little bit, like, oh, like why did he kill himself? Well, 2 weeks earlier he had just mentioned, you know, this thing, and it's like, oh, and it's like this is where the narrator comes on and says like this is the, that's what it felt like I was watching basically. Yeah. But yeah, I mean I
will say that like I don't usually do videos of this nature at all. Like usually my videos are like telling a story. And like they're just I don't know. This was hilariously, like, I don't know one will believe this, but this was my idea of toning down the presentation.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. I clearly have, like, a very altered perception of, like, I need to get my optics in check a little bit, I guess. Like, I'll hold that L for sure. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, have a good one, buddy.